Welcome to The Intentional Exit, a leadership legacy podcast for those who don't just want to retire, but want to do it well. I'm Rebecca Schriver, and this is where we help you protect what you've built, reduce unnecessary taxes, and create a plan that gives you clarity, confidence, and control. So together, we make sure your exit is not accidental, it's intentional. Before we begin, please note that the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as tax, legal, or financial advice. For guidance specific to your situation, we recommend consulting with a qualified professional.
Most people don't avoid financial decisions simply because they're irresponsible. They avoid them because doing nothing feels safe. However, we know that delaying these important decisions can cause inflexibility as well as trouble down the line. Today in episode 8, we're going to focus in on why creating this decision and actually taking action is extremely important, and why delaying it can cause bigger ramifications down the road. In episode 8, let's talk about your indecision and how to get over that hurdle so that you can get your retirement on track. So, what is this indecision? Oftentimes, when we're sitting down with clients, we start talking about really hard things. And even though we work very heavy on the education side, so we are always working with our clients on the education side first. We work through why we're talking about these decisions, why it pertains to them in particular, and how they can structure themselves going forward. But then all of a sudden, there's this freeze, right? All of a sudden, they don't do anything simply because it feels like too much. And whenever you're looking at all of the parts and pieces, as you enter into this phase of the intentional exit, you really have to focus in on what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And then the execution is key. Because if we don't execute, and let's say we're going to wait, right? You want to wait a couple years before you get started, or you're not sure. If you're not sure, don't do it. I always tell my clients, listen, if it doesn't make sense, don't do it. But if you can find the logic in our reasoning, if you can follow along and see how it's going to benefit your life, let's not delay, right? If we can grab hold for every year that we do these things in advance of your retirement, you are light years ahead. And so even if you're moving into retirement, even if you're 65, 70, 75, even up to 80, you still have time. There is absolutely nothing we can do about yesterday, right? It's already happened, it's in the past, but what we can control, and I'm always talking to my clients about what can we control, we can control our next steps. And so one of the biggest things that we've talked about, if you've listened to any of our podcasts, you know that we have talked a lot about taxes in retirement. Well, when was the best time to start creating those tax-free buckets? Last year, right? The year before, but can we do anything about that? Absolutely not. So as we're moving forward, when is the day to start? It's today, right? So we have to sit down and we have to look at your particular situation. We can strategize and look at how long are we going to pay these voluntary taxes? When are we going to cut them off? And when are we going to give the IRS what they're owed? Because I can tell you right now, that for my clients who start in their 50s or even in their 60s, they are going to see a much higher, much more long-term return from doing so than those in their 70s and 80s. And that doesn't mean that it's not still important. I don't want you to hear me say that. That is not at all what I'm saying. But the earlier we can get to this, the earlier we can start working on this, the more effective we can be inside of their retirement. For instance, right, if we can start moving all of their forever taxable dollars into a tax-free space in their 50s, in their early 60s, then we reduce and eliminate some of the very expensive tax things that happen in those later years. So once you start taking Social Security, if you're also using those taxable dollars out of an IRA or 401k, and remember, we want those, right? Because those were our dollars to be able to live off of. But if you start pulling them out of pre-tax accounts while you're in Social Security, you're going to end up with that voluntary tax, right? Most likely for most people. So if you have these IRA dollars coming out, you're going to possibly have that triggering event, and most people will, that triggering event inside of your Social Security where all of a sudden, simply because you pulled from a particular type of account, you've triggered all of a sudden these taxes on Social Security that you otherwise wouldn't have had. But what if we get into a tax-free position earlier, right? What if we do it before you turn on Social Security? Well, then we won't necessarily have those taxes, right? Because if we get them into a tax-free bucket early, then that means when we pull those dollars out, not only are they tax-free, but they also do not create that triggering event on the Social Security. Then we have those pesky RMDs, right? We've talked about these RMDs, or those required minimum distributions. Well, the government only cares about your pre-tax dollars. If they're post-tax dollars and the government can't get any money out of them because that was the deal that they made with you, then they are less likely to worry about them, right? And if they're less likely to worry about them, then you don't have to worry about it either. It's funny how that works. And so when we're talking about this, if we can do these things and if we can make these shifts systematically, then we have this bandwidth, right, or this time to be able to get you into a better position. But if you wait, if you say, I'll deal with it when I get closer, right? I'm going to deal with it when I get closer to retirement or closer to that RMD. Well, guess what you just did? You reduce down the amount of time that we have to take advantage of the lower tax brackets, therefore giving you less opportunity to reduce your overall taxes during your lifetime. And for those of you who have already retired, maybe you retired last year, the year before, or 5 years ago, well, that doesn't mean we can't help you. It just means that we may have to look at it a little differently, right? We might have to take it into consideration in a different aspect. I met with a couple the other day. They're in their upper 70s, but we're still able to help them tremendously to reduce the overall taxes on their estate. We're able to look at how do we best preserve these dollars for their later years? How do we reduce down the overall taxes? How do we pay for them in the lowest possible tax bracket, and then make sure that there is better control over those dollars as we pass them along to their heirs? And so, again, just because you're not 50s or early 60s doesn't mean that you won't find value, but understand that delaying it actually delays its effectiveness, right? It's just like anything. If you delay something, it doesn't have as long for it to be effective during your lifetime. And then that, of course, brings us to long-term care and estate planning, right? So we were at church the other day, and the preacher said, you know, it's amazing. There's a statistic out there that says 10 out of 10 people are going to die. And it took me a second, but then I sat back and I thought, you know what? I'm stealing that one, buddy. I'm going to steal that one, because here's the thing. The other things we don't like to talk about, and we're going to talk about long-term care planning in a different episode, but I want you to hear me, okay? We know that on average, 78% of all individuals who reach 60 years old, so if you have made it to 60, you have roughly a 4 out of 5 chance that you at some point are going to need long-term care. And last time I checked, long-term care was not cheap, right? It's very expensive. And when we're looking at how that can affect our retirement, we need to make sure that we're planning for it. And it doesn't mean that you have to go out and buy a long-term care insurance policy. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need to have a plan in place to know exactly how it is we would deal with something like that in the event that comes along. And you have a high likelihood of that happening. When it comes to estate planning, you've got a 10 out of 10 chance that you're not getting out of here alive. And yet people procrastinate on those two things for very real and important reasons. And those real and important reasons are nobody wants to talk about it, right? Nobody wants to talk about when they die. Nobody wants to talk about if they have a stroke or Alzheimer's or dementia. Those are very scary things. But the worst thing that I see happen is that people delay it simply because it's uncomfortable. And so because they delay it, then I have the unfortunate side of things where their family comes and talks to me when it's simply too late, right? They'll come and sit down with me and they'll say, Mom had a stroke or Mom had a fall. It's a lot of times Mom, right? Or Dad went into the hospital and he's not going to be able to take care of himself. He's having trouble walking. His memory's going, whatever that looks like. By the time we hit crisis mode, we're kind of in trouble because at that point, we've really only got a few options. And so by planning early and getting things in place, you can actually save yourself, your loved ones, not only dollars, but a tremendous amount of heartache. Because on the flip side of that, for those of my clients who have planned, right? Those ones who have not delayed, but have looked at the problem and gone, you know what? I don't want my family to go through that. I want them to get everything in place. I want them to be able to handle things. Then we can get them organized, or we can get you organized so that whenever they show up, I can say, oh yes, we have a plan for that, right? We already put into place this is where the dollars are going to come from. Hey, by the way, here's the paperwork that you need. I'm here to help you, but you've got this because your parents, your mom, your dad, whoever that is, has really done a great job of making sure that you were prepared, right? They've done a great job of making sure that when this day came, there was a roadmap in place. And it's never going to be perfect, right? It's never going to be 100%, but we can get close, right? And having some sort of plan and having a way or a roadmap or a guide to be able to know, hey, this is what we organized and this is what we put in place, and now all you have to do is go and execute it. What a gift, right? What a gift. On the flip side of that, if you don't have a roadmap, then there's chaos, right? Because not only are they dealing with all of what's going on, but they're also trying to navigate, how do we do this? How do we do it financially? How do we do it emotionally? How do we take care of this person that we love so much that we don't have the tools, right? It's kind of like having a nail, but then you've got a screwdriver, and how are you supposed to make that work? Well, if we hand your family the right tools because you took the time to not just find out about it, but to schedule the appointment, and then once you have the knowledge, actually put it into place, it makes a huge difference, right? It also means that you're not going to have to make fear-based decisions. It means they're not going to have to make fear-based decisions because we took the time to put together the structure to make sure that at least there was a roadmap. And that roadmap is very important. Okay. The other one, income planning, right? So a lot of people think, oh, I'll figure out the income whenever I put in my 2 weeks notice. When I let my company know that I'm going to retire, I'll have more time to look at it. But the problem is that a lot of the best income strategies for retirement are oftentimes set up 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years in advance. And again, don't think that that means if you're in your 70s that this is too late. It's not, okay? It's not. But we can obviously be way more effective if we catch you in your 50s and 60s. You know, I sit down with people all the time. I sit down with older people, I sit down with younger people, and we look at everything based on the situation that you're currently in. We look at everything based on where are you today? Because also your outlook looks totally different if you're in your 50s than in your 70s. Because if my goal is to carry you out to 105, that's a lot of difference in years, right? Also, if you're still working and you're earning income, then that's going to adjust your tax bracket. It's going to show us, right? And it's going to show us that we need to talk about things a little bit differently. But it doesn't reduce the value. It's still important, right? Because even if you're in your 70s, it's very possible you could live another 15, 20 years, and you don't want to run out of money, and you don't want to start having to make decisions based on whether or not that bucket, right? We talked about the bucket method last week, whether or not that bucket is big enough and whether or not it's leaking out the bottom faster than it's growing. And so by kind of combining these things, right, we've talked a little bit about all of these different facets. It's getting yourself set up in a legal fashion with lawyers, right? I'm not a lawyer, I don't pretend to be a lawyer, but we have lawyers that we work with, right? If you can get that estate plan set up, if you can get your plan, whether it's, you know, hey, I'm going to get a policy or I'm not, but if you can have a plan for if you have a long-term care event, and remember, there's a high likelihood that you will, if we can figure out your health insurance and look at, hey, what are the risks of this policy? What are the rewards of this policy? What's the expense of this? How is that going to look? If we can look at that, and then we add in tax planning, and then, hey, we look at how do we shore up your income? If we can kind of run that gauntlet, right, and get everything as organized as humanly possible, then again, those bumps in the road on the way to that intentional exit are not going to feel as volatile. They're going to feel like little pebbles instead of hitting one of those, you know, those speed bumps whenever you're going through a parking lot. And so we want to make sure that as we're looking at these different things, that we're not just gathering information. Gathering information is horribly important. Like I said, we spend a tremendous amount of time working through these different things. We don't ever want you to follow someone blindly. We want you to ask questions. We want you to look at the benefits and the drawbacks of everything that you're doing. We want to talk through the benefits and the drawbacks. We want to talk through the logic of how we're setting things up. But if all we do is talk, right? If the only thing we do is talk about benefits and drawbacks and you never take action, then it was worthless, right? It didn't amount to anything because your family will still be in the same exact position. You will still be in the same exact position if you do nothing, right? Because indecision is a decision to stay stuck. And so when we can take a hold of the reins, right? When we can drive our bus, I always tell people, listen, I want to hand you back the keys to your life. I want to hand you back the keys to your retirement. I want you to know that you are in control. I want you to have safety and security around the things that you're doing. I want you to feel good. I want you to wake up and know, hey, we're going to do this step by step. We're going to be in control, and then we are going to have a much higher likelihood of success because we didn't stick our head in the sand. We took the time, we learned about it, we worked through it, we decided what was good for you and what was not. You decided what was good for you and what was not. And then we took action based on those plans, right? And so if we can do that, if we can really take a step back and not just learn, but take the actual steps, you are going to be so much further ahead than if you just sit around and look around, right? Because doing nothing doesn't get you anywhere. So I hope this has been informational for you. I hope that you have found some good little nuggets in here, but remember, action is the key. So make sure that you schedule an appointment, give us a call, send us an email, smoke signals, whatever that looks like. But let us know how we can help you to better organize yourself for that intentional exit. Please remember that none of this is to be used as legal, tax, or financial advice. This is for informational purposes only. If you found this valuable, please hit the like and subscribe button. Please share it with a friend. We are working on building our intentional exit nation, and we're so glad that you're a part of it. We're glad that you're here, and we hope to see you next week.